This is how you open, edit, and save the Photopea document. This is the tile that we've been working on, or an example of a tile in Photopea. So click it to open it up. This is a sample tile that I created specifically to play around with. So you'll notice that there are 3 layers. There's an ink layer, which is the black top layer. There's what I'm calling a color layer, which currently has nothing in it. And then there's a background layer called white back. That's just the background. So make sure that you always are selecting the color layer by clicking on it over here. To choose a color, click on this little swatch down here in the lower left corner. And you can click on this rainbow and drag it up and down to select a color. We've talked about saturation a lot in here. As you go to the left over here, this is very little saturation. You can see the very light green in here. If I move it over here, this is as saturated of a pure color as you can get of that particular green. And if you want a little bit different green, you can move it down like this just to change the green. As it moves down this way, it gets more of a yellow green. Move it up this way, it gets more of a bluish green until you get way up here. If you want it slightly darker green, notice how it gets darker as it goes this way. And you can see what it's changing into here. So I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to select the paintbrush tool and just start painting. Unlike the other drawing that we worked on, you can paint the characters or the background or both. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the color here. Click OK. Then if I want to color the background, I can color it around like this. Notice how when I color here, it goes right through the black line. That's because the black is a different layer. You can see the 2 different layers by clicking on this eyeball. Since I made a little mistake on this particular one, if I want to erase it, I can click on this little tiny arrow at the bottom of this brush tool. And for some reason, it's not working. There we go. So double click on it and click the eraser tool. And I can bring the eraser over here and erase it. If I want this exact same green color, one way to do it is to click on the color palette here, move this aside, and notice how the cursor changes from an arrow to a plus. I'm going to click over here, and it's going to select the exact color I want. Then I can click OK and continue painting. It's a little bit tricky, but you'll get used to it. If I want to zoom in, I can hold the Control key down and tap the plus, which is right next to the backspace key, to get it larger. When you zoom in really close like this, what I want to paint is over here. So I'm going to hold the space bar down and watch what happens to the cursor. Actually changes into a little hand, and as long as I have the space bar selected, I can move the screen around. Note that it's not actually moving the screen. What it's doing is it's moving the view of where you're looking. So again, I'm just going to continue painting. If I want the brush to be a little smaller, there's a couple of ways to do it. One way is to go up here in the top. Once I've got the brush selected, you'll notice it says 15 with this little arrow. If I click on this, I can reduce the size like this to get a really small brush or smaller brush. Also, there are bracket tools right below the plus and equal sign on your keyboard. If I tap the right bracket tool, the brush gets larger. If I tap the left one, it gets smaller. That way you can get really tight in here. One other thing you're going to want to do, notice how there's a little white line inside here? You can see a little tiny white line where the green stops next to the black there. On the ink layer, I'm going to click on here, and here's where you need to pay close attention. I'm going to click on the ink layer, and where it says normal here, I'm going to select darken. Watch what happens when I select darken to this area over here. Now, here's the most critical part. Don't color on the ink layer. Only color on the color layer. So I'm going to click the color layer again. I'm going to move this and keep painting. Since I want to delete this green over here, I'm going to go back to my paintbrush and select eraser and erase. And you can go back and forth with the eraser tool and the paintbrush tool. To see what the whole thing looks like, I'm going to hold the control key down on my keyboard and tap the 0. And that's going to show me the whole tile. Now, what you want to do is you want to save this file on your computer. And the way to do that is to click File, Save as PSD. PSD is short for Photoshop file or Photoshop document. So I'm going to click over here and do an underscore, which is Shift minus. Type in my first initial and last name. And I'm going to do that again and do P1 for period 1. If you're in period 2, you would type P2, P3, P5, P6, etc. Since I want quick access to this, I'm going to click on the desktop and save it on the desktop. So that has saved the layered file that I can then reopen and continue painting.